Okay, so in this tutorial, I'm just going to cover how to produce these drawings right here. These drawings right here. So under Part D and E, there's several deliverables. The first of which are the cast elevations. So these are black and white photographs of your cast objects, and then a line drawing overlay, and a little bit of kind of editing just to get the images to look good. So I'm going to go over how to do that editing in Photoshop, and then how to trace and compose the elevations. So I have two elevations, photograph elevations of my cast here. As you can see, they're pretty close to straight on, sort of perpendicular to one face of the cast. So I'm going to bring these both into Photoshop. And basically what I want to do is, I'm actually going to, so just open in two files, I'm going to drag this into the same file. So that whatever I do to one, I'll just automatically do to the other. Okay, let me turn that layer off really quick. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is just make it all black and white. So in the layers panel, down at the bottom over here, there's this little circle with a half black, half white. Click on that and I'm going to go to, so these are all my adjustments. So I can do things like change color and contrast and black and white. So I'm going to go ahead and select black and white. You can play with balance a little bit here if you want, but it's not going to make a whole lot of difference. You shouldn't change it a whole lot using this. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of darken the background relative to the foreground. So I could get another, actually before I do that, I just want to turn up the contrast. So these ones in here, brightness, contrast, levels, curves, and exposure are all pretty good for dealing with contrast. We could try levels, for example. You can see it'll kind of bring up, we can bring up the dark spots, bring down the light spots, and just kind of bring a little bit more. We don't want to bring it too bright or too dark that we're losing detail, but we want to bring out a little bit more difference in the image. So the last thing I want to do is I'm going to make the kind of background less prominent. So again, I'll make another layer. This time I'll just use exposure. And what I'm going to do is turn it way, way down. So gamma will make it darker, offset will make it darker, exposure obviously makes it lighter. Right, a little too much, but. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is use what's called a transparency mask. So these layers by default, if you look in the layers panel, that's our adjustment, and that is what's called a transparency mask. So when I click on the adjustment itself, you can see up here in my properties panel, I can change the kind of properties of that adjustment. On the right hand side, I can actually paint on this layer to change kind of where it's affecting my image and where it isn't. So if I click over to my transparency mask, go over here to the paintbrush tool right there. Also, you can get to that by pressing B. Now, a quick trick here is if you hold Alt on the keyboard, right click and drag your mouse, you can change the circle size by going left to right, and you can change the kind of hardness or sharpness of the circle by going up and down. That's just a quick kind of trick for working with the paintbrush. Also, if I hold Control Space, left click and drag, I can zoom in and out. So you're going to see me moving around a lot like that. Also, space, right click and drag is pan. You're going to see me also doing that. So that's how you kind of navigate in Photoshop. I'll go back to my brush tool. Now what I want to do is change my color swatches to black and white. And the way that transparency masks work is anywhere where I paint in white, and you can see my layer is white by default, the thing is visible. So in this case, the adjustment is visible, is affecting what's below. And anywhere where I paint in black, it becomes invisible. So if I change my color thing, or my swatch to black, and kind of paint my cast here, you can see it's becoming more, or the contrast, the effect of the contrast is kind of going away. And if I look in the color mask itself, the transparency mask, you can see what I've kind of drawn there. So this doesn't have to be super precise. I'm just going to go through and kind of make it so it's not affecting my cast. Now, I kind of went a little too far right here, so I could paint over again in white. I just need to swap my black and white colors. If I hit X on the keyboard, I can swap back and forth quickly. And I can go back in here and just make those background areas dark again. There we go. It doesn't have to be too perfect, but that's good enough. All right. All right, so there's one image. So I could go ahead and save that now. I go to File, Save As. First of all, if you want to be able to edit this again in the future and like kind of be able to do the same process, what you want to do is save it as a Photoshop file or a .psd. So I would save it first of all as a PSD. That way, if I need to make adjustments or anything in the future, I can come back and do that. I missed a spot here. And in order to be able to trace it, I'm also going to make a JPEG. I will go again to File, Save As, and save it as a JPEG. And I will call this one black and white. Save. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is the same for my other image, my other elevation. So I could make this, turn this layer off because it's only working for that elevation down there. If I want to make a copy of it, I can right-click on that layer and hit Duplicate Layer. OK. I can then go, I'm going to select the transparency mask, right-click, hit Delete. So I'll turn it back on. And then down here in the bottom of the Layers panel, there's this other icon, the square with the circle in it, and that will make a new transparency mask. And again, I'll just paint in black where I don't want my contrast to be. There we go. And we'll go in and clean it up. Oh. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now I would, again, save as, JPEG, and I'll call this one my other elevation. Click OK, then I'll File, Save again, just to save the changes to my Photoshop file. I can close that as well. So now what I want to do is I want to add these kind of other layers of the line drawing overlay, just to kind of make more explicit like what the geometry is and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring these images into Rhino and trace them. So in Rhino, first of all, make sure I'm in the right units. Put stuff in inches. Turn the grid off. Okay, and then I can bring these images in. I can use the command picture. I'll go to where my folder is. Okay, bring one of my images in. Oops. Okay, just click in two places to kind of locate it. And what I'm also going to do is make a new layer now called Picture. And I'll put that on that layer so I can lock it. That way I don't keep messing up while I'm tracing it. Also bring in the other elevation. Yeah, you can also just drag them in and then select the option for picture. Okay. So I'll put both of those pictures on the layer picture. What I also want to do, so I'm going to draw on just the default layer. And first of all, I'll make a rectangle. So the size of my elevations should be about 5 by 10. So I'll use the command rectangle. Okay, these are way too big. All right, that's good to know. So I'll select both of my elevations, use the command scale. I'm going to try and kind of match up the scale. So also I could put my layer default, the display color to white. Click OK. That way I can see it on top of my image. Right. Pretty good. I'll copy that. Do the same for this guy. Okay, that looks pretty good. So then what I want to do is actually kind of trace the shapes of just the kind of surface, the elevation, as it were. So I will first of all lock the layer picture. And then what I want to do is kind of trace this profile outline shape. In order to do that, I'm going to use the command sketch. So the command sketch will allow you to kind of freeform draw curves. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on a start point, turn Smart Track off. I'm going to click on a start point and then let go of my mouse button and just start to drag my mouse. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just going to get as close as I can. I don't need to take too long to do this. And I'm just going to kind of try and trace the outline of that shape. And then I'm using right click and drag on my mouse to pan as I go. And I will say the further in you zoom with the sketch tool and the kind of slower you draw your line, the more control points it'll create. Oops, I just clicked by accident. That's okay. Just make a new one. Start where I left off. Okay. And I should also point out, if you kind of mess up a lot or something, like let's say I accidentally went like that, don't worry about it, just finish the line. Because when you're done, you can always select that line and edit the control points. Kind of get it closer to where you want it. And it'll also automatically sort of smooth out what you've done. So don't have to worry too much. Okay, that's pretty good. All right. And let me do the same up here. I could draw a line just to close that one. Okay, there we go. And then I would also, so I'm going to quickly pause the video and then finish tracing all of these. And then I'll show you what to do kind of after you've got all your outlines established. Okay, and so now I have pretty much a good kind of rough outline of each of these images traced. And what I want to do next is compose them. So if I take a look back at the assignment sheet, it says the page size for this is 11 by 17. So what we're going to do is just take these lines. I'm going to turn off the layer picture for right now. You could also superimpose some information about your, like from your elevations if you wanted to. I'm going to add another layer, call this dash. Okay, and I'm just going to line these guys up. Okay, and what I would also do is kind of differentiate between the lines that I think should be, oops, maybe just put that on. Should be like a heavier line weight, so I add maybe a couple line weights here. Picture back on. Okay, so this line as well. Okay. Okay, and then I'm going to take all these lines and export them. So I'll go File, select all that stuff, go File, Export, Selected. Save it in that folder. So under Save As Type, I'm going to change it to Adobe Illustrator. And export it. I can keep it 1:1. In this case, I think I'm going to make it 1/2 inch. I don't think there's a required scale on this one. Yeah, so these ones need to be 1:1, but these ones there's no required scale. And then I'll go ahead and open up Illustrator. And bring those in. Also close this. Okay. So once you have your file open in Illustrator, where is everything? Oh, there we go. So if you can't find it, I mean, it might be floating somewhere like out away from the paper space. If you go Select All or Control A, you should be able to see where it's at. Bring it up here. That's still too big. I'm going to go ahead and scale it again. Oh, well, first actually, if I go up to the top and hit Document Setup, or go to File, Document Setup, I can hit Edit Artboards. And in here, I'll be able to change my paper size. So I'm just ensuring that I'm at 17 by 11. That looks good. Hit Escape. And then I'll select these lines again, right click on the canvas and go transform, scale, maybe go to like 25%. Okay, and then I should have a few different lines here. But before I get too far into that, I also want to bring in those photos I edited. Oops. I'll just select those photos and drag them into Illustrator. Oh, they're huge. Okay. So those, as you can see, automatically went onto a new layer called layer 1. I'm just going to drag that down to the bottom so that all my line work is kind of underneath it. I could also change the color of my other lines to white. So I'm not sure if we've gone over this or not, but in Illustrator, in order to select a line or to select objects on a layer, I can click on this little bubble at the end and it'll select every object on that layer. Then in the color panel, I have my fill and I have my stroke under the stroke. So I have, that's the fill, that's the stroke. And so in order to change the color of a line, I want to change the stroke color. I'll change it to black, or I'm sorry, I'll change it to white. It was already on white. Do that for each of my layers. Okay, and then when I kind of place my photos, I should be able to line it up, or I should be able to see those lines better. And when you adjust the size of a photo, you want to hold Shift on the keyboard to kind of keep it proportional. You can also use the arrow keys to move things around. Okay, I don't know if I messed this up or something, but okay, looks pretty good. I can select all this stuff at once and kind of move it around. I'll try and, again, when I move stuff, I want to hold Shift, oops. Hold Shift to kind of move it straight because we know these two elevations are already lined up, or the line work is lined up. Okay, and the last thing will be to clip my images. So you can see right now they're, although the elevations are lined up, the kind of frame of the image is not. So what I want to do is make a new outline. So I'm going to go up here to the rectangle tool, make a new outline on top of my photo. Then I can make a copy of it by dragging it. I'm holding Shift to drag it straight, and I'm holding Alt to copy it. You can see my little cursor makes a double arrow when I hold Alt. And I'll just kind of move it over, get it kind of centered. I know they're lined up to each other. I know they're kind of centered on the elevation. And then I can use this new outline to kind of clip my image. So I'll select the outline, select the image, right click and hit Make Clipping Mask. Oops, I'll do the same on this one. Right click, Make Clipping Mask. There we go. And so now the images are lined up to each other. And the last thing I might do is just go in here and add a little more hierarchy to my line weight. So my heavy line weight looks pretty good. Maybe make my lighter, or my dash line lighter. So in the stroke panel, I can make the line weight a little lighter. Oops, that's not lighter. You can also edit the dashed line pattern. and turn down the line weight for the default layer. Uh-oh. All right. And if you do want to edit the images again, because we've already clipped them and we have the clipping mask in the right place, what you would do is just double click on the image. Now I can edit the clipping mask, or I can edit the size of the image without editing the clipping mask, or I can select the clipping mask and edit it without editing the image. And then up here you see it shows that I'm kind of inside this clipping mask, and I could double click outside again and just to go back. Right, so there's 2 elevations. You should have 2 for each cast. So 2 casts each. You'll be able to lay those out on 11 by 17. And then the next video, we're going to cover how to do some of the other drawings like the axonometric and stuff like that. So I will end this video here.